Hi guys, welcome back. If you're back, hey. Um, Welcome to today's episode of Inherently, where we talk about how gender influences empathy. I think this was probably I think this was probably my favorite part and most interesting part to research because I hadn't researched it previously and kind of aligned with what I already knew from my own life experiences. But I was like, wow, people have actually studied this and now there's actual proof that, what I've already known is very much true. Yeah, so let's get into it because I think it's really exciting. I don't really have much to say. I feel like a lot of the time, if you're a woman, you experience that men do not necessarily have the greatest empathy skill a lot of the time. And I can say that I've noticed this since I was a kid, and it's just continued throughout my life, which is so fun and exciting and just lights up my life every day. Yeah, and I just think it's funny. I feel like as they get older, maybe they develop empathy, or if something happens to them. But I also oftentimes find myself having to tell my male peers or male counterparts, imagine if it was you, I have to physically tell them to put themselves in another person's perspective when it's like somebody going through something. So anyway, let's go ahead and get into the neuroscience behind it. So another significant aspect of social identity is gender. Therefore, prominent differences have been found in empathic ability between women and men. Self-reported empathy and emotional intelligence measures have repeatedly shown women typically scoring higher than men in both aspects. In terms of emotional functioning itself, women have also scored higher in several areas, including emotional expressivity, emotional contagion, emotional awareness, empathy, and emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence and empathy often work hand in hand in that empathy is incorporated in the overall construct of emotional intelligence. And these differences between genders have been attributed to two main categories: biological factors and sociocultural factors. So let's start with the biological. It has been theorized that the female brain is principally hardwired for empathy, and the male brain is predominantly hardwired for understanding and building system. So yeah, you guys need to start building houses. What happened to men that used to build houses? I don't know. This is thought to be due to how different brains are differentially exposed to and affected by testosterone in utero. So we can flash back to the childhood and in utero episode. I mainly talked about oxytocin. Now we know that testosterone also greatly affects how these different areas are developed, with the higher degree of testosterone in male fetuses being theorized to shrink brain areas involved in emotional functioning and empathy. And obviously with the lower degree being linked to a greater volume of these areas within female fetuses. Additionally, other studies have found both structural and functional differences in the amygdala and other regions involved in emotional processing between genders, with women displaying enhanced patterns of activity in these areas. So let's get into these sociocultural influences now. Gender stereotypes typically appear as early as 2 years old and may influence one's self-concept and cause differences in self-reports of behaviors and emotional functioning. Developmental studies on children and teens show that emotions such as empathy are often socialized in terms of gender, with parents speaking in more emotional terms to girls. Based upon the significance of the sociocultural elements, studies have shown that gender differences in empathy may parallel stereotypes associated with gender orientations rather than one's biological sex that they are born with. Furthermore, across many cultures, women are expected to be the voice of more moral emotion and empathy than men. So I want to pause here to talk about this a little bit. Within all of the papers that I read, none of them really talked about how people that don't ascribe to the two female or male gender identities may develop empathy over time. And I found that really interesting because obviously non-binary people are an important part of our society. And I think it's important to do studies that include them as well. So later on, I will be having guests that identify as non-binary or identify as something outside of just male or female, just to sort of get more of their perspective on things. But this sort of that one sentence in this study sort of suggests that it more aligns with what the person identifies with rather than the biological sex that they are born with. So I think that's sort of important to note here. Additionally, it's important to note that the importance of parenthood again here, with parents speaking to girls in more emotional terms and you letting, I guess, girl children or female children experience their emotions more fully and express their emotions more fully and providing them with the vocabulary to express their emotions more fully. I think that that's really important, and that's something that we as a society need to place more emphasis on and need to implement within parenting for future generations of females and males to be able to understand each other a little bit better and for men to be able to empathize with people a little bit more. I also found it really interesting that they suggested that within cultures, women are expected to be the moral voice. However, a lot of the time, women are not appointed to positions of power, which is really interesting. But I mean, that is something that we can even discuss later on with the guests. So in a separate study, it was found that with a group of participants that was presented with fictitious neurological information that suggested that males were more empathetic than females, there were no significant differences between self-reported empathy between the genders. However, it was still found that outside of the self-reported scores, women scored higher than men in more empirical measures of empathy. This suggests that sociocultural differences in empathy may be influenced, but not the actual biological differences that were mentioned before. Sex and gender differences may have been displayed from birth, with female newborns displaying more contagious crying for longer than boy newborns, and contagious crying is essentially a concern for other neonates in distress by continuing to cry as the other one cries, which is really interesting why babies do that. Anyway, infant girls also displayed greater responsiveness to social stimuli and engage in greater eye contact with female interactors just a few hours after birth. During their first year of life, children begin to be socialized into these differences, with maternal emotional interactions with infants appearing in very subtle but significant differences amongst genders. It is suggested that the mother-infant emotional exchanges correlate with very early differences in female and male expressivity. Even beyond parenthood, just the objects that children play with may also play a role in the differences that infants show, with infant girls showing a higher preference for objects with human attributes and boys showing preference for mechanical objects. Amongst preschoolers, females displayed more emotional presence in self-reported empathy scores and higher usage of mental state verbs. In the false belief task, which reflects theory of mind ability and cognitive empathy, preschool-age girls displayed better scores in the false belief task and better perspective-taking abilities and proposals for help for others in need compared to male participants. As children aged from ages 5 to 9, girls displayed higher mentalizing ability and higher score in self-reported empathy scales, as well as identification of emotion from the EYES test, which is like a theory of mind, or more like a emotional recognition test, which is important for theory of mind. In a study where participants were exposed to effective facial displays, girls' rapid facial reactions were consistently of higher intensity than that of boys. And this is considered to be an involuntary marker for effective empathy and reenactive of others' affective states. Again, these trends continue over, I guess, as these children age. These differences amongst genders do not sort of dissipate as they get older. However, they are maintained, with women showing a clear superiority in the accuracy and speed of deciphering nonverbal emotional behaviors and greater emotional contingent and better performance on mind reading tasks compared to their male participants. Additionally, just to circle back to the neurobiology, it has been shown that there are significantly larger gray matter columns in brain regions with mirror neuron networks in women, as well as the pars orbicularis, which directly correlated with higher empathy scores in women. Mirror neurons, the results for their significance and empathy were sort of conflicting. So I included it in the paper, however, I did not include it in the introduction, but they're essentially neurons that allow us to mirror the actions as well as somewhat emotional states of others. But again, the literature was a bit conflicting, so that's just sort of a brief definition on what those do. So yeah, let's talk about it with our guests now. Hi guys, I'm here with our next 3 guests. Yeah, you guys can introduce yourselves in any order you would like.
Hi, my name is Teo Cooper. I'm a senior at Pitzer College. I'm 22 years old. I'm a biology major, and I use they/them pronouns.
Hi, I'm Vaughn. I'm a junior at Pomona, 21, majoring in molecular biology, and a minor in politics. Oh, use they/them pronouns.
Hi, I'm Ode. I'm a senior at Pomona studying economics, and I use she, her pronoun.
What are some personal examples that you have from your relationships or your friendships? Just like examples of you showing empathy, like anecdotes you can share with us.
Okay, well, I mean, I think with most of my friends, I know, what's the reason / people just wanting a sounding board. So I do a lot of the emotional labor of listening to people when things are going wrong with their other relationships, whether it be friendship or more serious ones, or just things that are irritating them day to day, or stuff that it's their regular existential crises. And I think that does cost me a lot of my relationships with people in terms of that, and just I've been told that I'm regularly reliable and really loyal and dependable on those sorts of things. And I think I am for a lot of friends. Sometimes it's oh, this is the first person that I go talk to. Or I talk about these things with you, but not with other people. And as everyone's lives have been, hit come their senior year, I'm getting a lot of stories, a lot of different fallouts and tales of just being the shoulder / support, and I'm actually crying in front of someone, but this is horrible. And people get embarrassed doing that, so it's I'm not a hugger, but I'll do a lot of the comforting. So yeah, that is a big part in a lot of my friendships with people.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's also just listening to people. I think as a senior right now, I'm definitely just trying to pass on a lot of wisdom and just experiences that I've had in college to younger students. And yeah, this making them feel listened to. I've been getting lunch with a lot of freshmen that have reached out to me. We just want to talk about either issues they're having with their roommate, or someone they're romantically interested in, and just feel I'm someone who's actually gonna listen to them and take their concerns seriously. And I feel part of the way that I feel I'm a listener is asking questions and engaging with them in that way.
I feel for me, in addition to what they have or what they all said, I think one of the ways that I'm trying to be more empathetic is by listening more to critique about me from my friends. Because I feel most of the time in our relationships, we think that we do the right thing because those things are good. But then sometimes we don't really actually give to our friends the things that they actually need and want from us to be loved. And that usually causes a lot of clash in relationships. So I'm learning to apologize a little bit more, because sometimes when you know that you did something good, but then the person is telling you, actually, despite the fact that you think this is good, it wasn't good for me, and there's that feeling of shame, and you just want to argue, no, you're not even grateful. But just taking a step back, breathing, understanding that it's not about me, it's about the fact that I have to love the person, and meet them, the way that they expect and they want to be loved.
Do you guys have any personal examples from your relationships or your parents or your friendships in which either with like other gender identities showing more like empathy?
I would say, well, I have three parents. I have two moms and I have one dad. From the two moms, there's one who, if I should, for example, compare her to my dad has definitely much more empathy. And if I also have to compare him to my other mom, it's not that he doesn't have as much empathy, but obviously her empathy is like much more higher. But I would say, growing up, my dad's like, I'm literally my dad's princess. My dad doesn't refuse me anything. My dad is always listening. And with my other parent, it has always been a clash, even expressing the way that I feel. Like it was, like if you're not arguing, if you're not like literally fighting for our lives, we'll not be understood. And even then, like sometimes we just take things away that they are because like I don't want to do this anymore. Compared to my dad who listens and like he gives you examples and he talks to you as though you're having a conversation and he doesn't like fighting. And I would say like probably that's one of the most prominent experience for me. But generally, yes, from usually in my experience, I was much more than mine.
I think, in my experience, I only have certain kinds of friendships with men a lot of the time because there's many qualities that show up pretty regularly that are deeply irritating. Especially when it comes to like disagreements or like, why did you do that thing? And I feel like a lot of times when talking to men, it's either very much like, oh, problem solve. And it's like, it's not about the problem solving right now. We've moved past that. We can get past that. It's about the principle. And then there's a lot of like faint like confusion on like, I don't really understand what you mean when you say this. Or like, can you give me an example of this? The example is the situation we're talking about right now. Or like, worse is when it's like, oh, so I see that I've done this thing that was harmful. How can I make it better? And you're not gonna put the burden on me to like help you make me feel better or teach you how to be a better person. Because I'm at that point, it's like, what? You're just doing the thing to like close an issue and check that out versus like actually taking the time to be considerate and think critically and make long-term changes versus like this momentary, let me ameliorate this thing. So I think a lot of that has been better or like not really a problem so much where when it comes to like most of my friends are like women, or if not women, then they're probably queer in some way, shape, or form. Because that issue with men doesn't really show up when I'm talking to like my friends who are like guys and are gay or like trans men. And there's probably lots of layers to that one. But yeah, when it comes to like cishet men, like when it comes to like most other groups, and I think especially a lot of women, because I think there's a lot of conditioning and like putting yourself second to please everyone else when there's an issue, and bearing a lot of that social brunt. That those are usually things where we're actually good. Okay, let me just hash this thing out into the void, and then it's like, okay, now that I feel seen, heard, and like validated, or I like understand this thing that I misunderstood, now we can do the moving forward.
Yeah. Like, as you were talking, I feel like so much of, like, socialization when you're assigned, like, a woman at birth or female at birth or whatever, it's what can you give? And mostly that's, like, to men, but just in, like, overall, like, it's like, what can you give? And so, I feel like, yeah, with my relationship with, like, women and, like, people that aren't men, it's yeah, it's less transactional. Like it's just so like expected that like if you do something for me, like I'm gonna do something for you, and not in this like tit for tat way, but very much in like a like hey, like I appreciate you, and so I'm gonna do what I can to like help this be like a really like good situation for both of us that I don't see in relationship with a lot of men. So I feel like my default relationships are with like women and non-men, but as also another component, I feel like it's when I do have like interactions with like older women or like less empathetic situations is because of my resistance to wanting to give all of myself and not have boundaries. Like I feel like, especially with my mom, some of the conflict comes in when I'm like, hey, you're not seeing my point. Like I don't feel like I should have to give all of myself to be like accepted in this one way of one certain situation, and then the conflict is like, no, but you should.
Great. I definitely had some questions that I was thinking of as you guys were speaking, but I just blanked on them. I'm not gonna lie to you. But you guys like touched on a lot of points, like Ode, and you guys both talked about your parents a lot. So I'm gonna like use that as a transition into the next question. But the literature, it talked a little bit about just like in general when parents are raising like women versus like men, the language that they use, and then also like the like objects like children play with and things like that lend more towards like what you're talking about, like women giving and like having to like express their emotions and be like willing to show up in a certain way, and men are not necessarily required to do that. Like for example, like girls are like allowed to like, or not allowed to, but like they're encouraged to play with like baby dolls and like things like that, and then boys are encouraged to play with things that are like are more mechanical and like require a different sort of not only like neurophysiological areas but also like emotional areas. So do you guys feel like there are ways that your parents like raised you in that way, or like examples that you have from your childhood, and do you think that contributed to you being more or less empathetic than like in general, or like people that identify with other genders?
I mean, mostly when I was growing up, I think I played more with stuffed animals than anything, because I was into animals. Like when I played with rats, it was because my older sister was really into rats, so she had a lot. But also, like, my younger brother was really into cars. Like, at one point, he, like, went like Lightning McQueen for Halloween. So we had a lot of, like, cars and trucks and little things, so we would play with that, too. And then, like, when I was younger, I was a little bit more into, like, sports. Like, I kind of played volleyball. But I don't know if that necessarily stands out. I will say, like, I know sometimes, like, parents are kind of like, oh my god, like, you can't play with that thing. And I don't think my mom did that. That hers was more of like a clothes issue. But yeah, I don't know. I was also like, I'm technically the middle sibling, but I kind of grew up as like an older sibling because my older siblings are a little older than me, and like, it's a shame of mom. So like to a degree, there was a lot of kind of like filling in like what would be like my mom's role with my younger brother at times, because that like makes things run smoothly. And like, yeah, my mom was like a very like involved parent, especially when I was like younger. So I think that was like, I very much like really understand and like relate to her, that experience, and like respect it a lot. And I had a lot of guy friends, and mostly had friends who were like boys until probably like later middle school, where they do also start like segregating students based on academics. But also, I don't know, there was something where like as people are growing and you start like looking at other people more critically, there were just a lot of things in terms of how men like interacted with women, and like I guess by extension like me, I was kind of like, wow, this is a little rancid. And there is something to say about like once men don't necessarily feel entitled to you, like that behavior does change. So I think that was a lot more interesting as I was like coming. through high school more so. It's like, okay, I didn't really have as many guy friends, but I know a lot of my guy friends did not treat me the same way they did others. And I think that's because with me, I'm going to hold accountable for tweaking.
Mhm.
And I think that accountability has also been like part of some of like the conflicts I've had in like college where people are kind of like shut, like, oh, you called me out on this thing right there in the moment. I actually don't know how to respond to that, but I don't know that you did that right then and there. So it's more of like a hostile response sometimes too. But this is a little segue out of your original question, but I think more so it was like behaviorally and seeing social dynamics that I was kind of uncomfortable with shaped a lot of that.
As for me, I grew up with 8 boys and men. Yeah, I feel man. And I mean, I have a sister, but she was never there. So it was just us in the house with my parents. Parents were never there. They were also traveling a lot. So I was given a lot of doors, growing up. But with 8 guys, like, you learn how to play video games. You learn how to watch, like, action movies. At 5, I was watching, like, things that I shouldn't, watching as a 5 years old because it was an age difference, 13 years old, 8 years old difference. So I don't think having been given dolls kind of like affected anything, But I would say that my brothers, younger, they were for the streets, for real. Like, no, it's true. Like, I was 10 years old and one of my brothers had 7 girlfriends, and each day they were a new person coming iPhone, and and as the younger and as the sister, you have to play the game high, like not to be very nice to them, but they deep down that what they're doing is not right, and in addition to that, the words, how like they would also like call women or your girlfriends. I know they were socialized by other people, but like I would hear them use those words, the very degrading type of words. And one of the experiences that really changed my life was when, so from the second girlfriend that one of my brother's side, 2 of them were distant cousins. But you didn't I know, right?
It's insane.
I know. So what? So one of those days, I guess my brother invited one, and then the other one was like, "Oh, I'm coming with my cousin," and he was like, "Oh, that's cool." Like, I mean, they didn't know, but like, I guess when they came in, I recognized the both of them. And one of them was like, "Oh, this looks like my close friend, like, like, how's Jew? Maybe they're brothers." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I have 8 different brothers, knowing them one that were from the same brother." So my brother comes out, and both of them are like, "Hi, honey." Oh. And I'm looking and I'm laughing, right? That is really good. Like, got you. And both of them are like fighting him. Like, "What the fuck are you doing? You thought I'm stupid." And they cut him out and blah, blah, and that. So my brother calls each one separately and started crying on the phone. Like, "I am so sorry. I will never do that again." Like, I didn't know that was a cousin. Like, that is the problem in the first place. And that's what the girl says. And then he's like, "Well, but like, you don't understand me. I didn't know you actually really love me, but now that I have to prove."
It's crazy.
But anyways, he hands up the phone, and he's like, "This dumb fucks." I'm like, "You literally just like in my mind, I'm like, this guy literally just cried to this girl, and he did the same to the other one, and even saying on the phone like long sound and everything. It was a whole spectrum. From that moment, I think I was kind of scarred. I was like, wow, like, I'm not even with right? Sometimes I talk about it in therapy. I'm like, no. It's fine, but it's not for you. It's in the Jerry. Hi, what? That's it. That's the only thing that's keeping you from treating me that way. Is because I sister, yes, which is crazy. So then, even though I really knew that, like certain things are wrong, but I was still very close to them. There are some ideas and ways that I was looking at, like the perspective I wish I was looking at women was not necessarily the right one. I think it's growing up and being more exposed to the internet. I think for other people, they will say that internet actually like kind of messed them up. I would say I was more educated by the internet about a lot of things, about being open-minded, about the things that I deserve, about the things that men are not supposed to be doing, you know. And I think those experiences, my internet experiences, and now another of my brother being clean and, you know, being more of a man, thinking that what they do was really wrong, and you're treating me and telling me how I should be treated and treating me that way specifically made, you know, like really change a lot about how I understand women, myself. Yeah, I don't know if I'm completely like over the whole situation, but yeah, that was a long story.
Wow. I have so many things to say, but I feel like I'm gonna address what you said, Ode, but I'm also gonna backtrack a little bit because I remember what my question was earlier. You guys both talked about how like your experiences with people that are like more gender fluid, non-binary are more empathetic. Do you think that like that fluidity in identity contributes to more empathic experiences? But if so, do you have any examples? And also like just to like provide some background, this wasn't necessarily in the gender readings, but in the ones about race, they talked about like possibly like mitigating. I'm not asking you guys about race, I'm sorry, but this is a different episode. But in the ones about race, they just talked about like possible ways to like mitigate lack of empathy between like people that are in like different racial groups, and like if there's more like fluidity or identity and things like that, or like identifying with another person's experiences, it can like contribute to more empathic like relations. Do you guys think that's true? And then Ode, if you have like, you know, any commentary as well.
I mean, I know it's not about race, but I fear most of my friends are not white. I do have white friends, y'all. Just anyway, that's beside the point. So, I mean, I think, like, okay, so one question isn't about race, but I didn't think there are layers that go with that, because most of my friends who are here are, like, some sort of person of color.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, there's many layers that go with dealing with that. You can just, like, dealing with your parents or extended family. And, like, I remember being in middle school and, like, every boy was, like, 10 toes ready to defend that they are not gay. Don't call them gay. Don't do that gay. Da-da-da-da-da-da. So, like, when you have friends that were like, oh, yes, like, in my school environment, which was, like, also majority black, I think there was also a different perception on, like, being, like, a lesbian versus, like, being, like, a gay man. So I think that has contributed in the way of, like, yeah, you have people, like, some of my friends that was, like, it was battle number 1 with their parents, battle number 2 with their peers, and then, like, battle number 3 with themselves. So then by the time you get through all those damn battles, you're like, you know, I thought about lots of things, and I had to reevaluate a lot of things. And I think, like, also, like, when you do find that place of, like, being heard or, like, being accepted or being validated, that makes, like, there's something about having that space where it's like when you come across other people who, like, haven't had that space, they're capable of providing it. I feel like they're not a lot more taken to extend it. And probably also to relate to some of, like, specific things when you cross, like, various parts of your identity like that. And then I think when it comes to, like, a lot of my friends who are women, especially, like, as we've, like, gotten older and more independent, and you do have more authority on like, no, I'm not going to tolerate this. No, I don't want to do this thing. No, I'm not going to give you this, because so much of that is like downplayed in school, like some early where it's like, oh, they're being mean to you because of this, so you should tolerate that thing. And then they get older and they're like, actually, no, I like this boundary, and like I can understand this is not okay, and it feels horrible to be forced to accept poor treatment, or like it's like feels bad and told like you're being dramatic, you're always being dramatic, you're always being sensitive. And when you kind of go all those like years and moments of just like completely being told the way that you're experiencing the things that are happening to you are like inappropriate, or there's not a place for that, it's like we should make a place for that. I should make a place for that for myself and for like other people who've been in those sorts of things. And I think earlier on too, like with women, and also like just from like pure justice. If you're like some form of like queer in like these kind of spaces, you are like forced to like own up to or be held accountable to a lot of things, or like have to address and change and adapt and respond. That I don't know necessarily a lot of my lifetime friends are. It's just chalked up as like growing pains. You'll like come out of it, but like I don't know how we can really expect like men to be capable or like have those emotional intelligence and conflict resolution skills when a lot of the time they go close to 18 years without anyone fighting them to the same extent. So I think that's definitely like contributed across like a lot of like gender and sexuality lines. Because it reaches a point where the people you're spending the most time with aren't your parents. It's like your school environment, your clubs. And a lot of what comes from your peers during those years does make a lasting impact, even though people always tell you, right, this doesn't matter. None of this is going to matter when you're an adult. But like, these are your foundational fears of learning how to socialize and be in social spaces.
I have a question about that. Do you think that, because before certain trans women become like trans women, most of them are socialized as like men, and I remember there was a period of time when like there was a lot of like backlash between trans women and women themselves, because trans women were basically saying that women are gatekeeping periods, and that they're trans women are more feminine than actual women. And they were very like, you know, there was a back and forth to the point where like someone said sometimes even when you're in a situation of oppression, because you were socialized as a man growing up, you don't feel like you have, like you don't work on your empathy, because you feel as though the oppression kind of like, how can I say it, kind of makes you non-accountable to your lack of empathy, because I've gone through a lot. I know what you're going through, so like, why are you saying that I don't understand? So I don't give a fuck. Do you guys understand what I'm trying to say? Do you guys think that it's a thing, or like it's just in a case by case like situation?
Well, I would start by saying that, like, yeah, black trans women are, like, the most killed indiscriminately besides indigenous trans women, like, in the United States. And so, when we talk about, like, who's being included and, like, empathy and stuff like that, like, trans women are often excluded out of those conversations. Yeah, trying to talk it down to, like, biology about who should be in those spaces is, like, really degrading, because obviously even some cis women don't have periods, and some cis women can't give birth and stuff like that. And I think as far as like, this is like an intersectional conversation, but I think like, yes, if you're a white trans woman, obviously you're a white person first. And so just being aware of your privilege, like not everyone has like access to the same things, to the same spaces. And I think that like, yeah, and so in that way, like there are things that as a white person that you don't need to consider. And I put that along the side, like black people know more about whiteness than white people, because obviously you've had to like think about it so much and analyze it, and you're having to like, you know, make your decisions about how you should behave according to like what whiteness, like what is okay in this white space, right? So I think that's also like something that like trans women have to do. So like black trans women are like not at all trying to like take up too much space at all, and they're just asking for their voices to be recognized in women's spaces. And I think that I haven't personally encountered, and I don't think that I can't speak for like black trans women community, but I think because of multiple stages of socialization, I don't think that like they are susceptible to the same like I don't know challenges of like I feel like yeah they are some of the most like empathetic people because of like the oppression they've had to overcome. I would say for ourselves, like I think that similar bond, like I definitely like think race takes like a limiting factor in thinking about the non-binary involved and like just like the trans community in general. Like I think that most of my friends are people of color, like my friends are black people, and then I think about parents as like a secondary element because I don't think there's like this immediate solidarity in I think that like often because that's their only oppression point, white people and be like, okay, but I'm clear, so you know, and they they tend to ignore their privilege, and so that's and in fact they can be even more harmful because you have certain white queer communities that are saying that these other queer communities are invalid, but because they have some stake in the game, like these voices are overheard and like more listened to than people actually experience real harm, real violence. And so, I think it's a very intersectional conversation about empathy that like I don't think there needs to be oppression in order to be empathetic, but I think there is a certain level of like critical thinking. Like I don't get to just exist without thinking about my existence and kind of like Mom was saying, like I'm gonna deal with my peers, I'm gonna deal with my family. Like I grew up in a really fundamentalist Christian family, and so constantly being told like who I am, it's not okay, and I'm lying to myself, and like kind of them doing like the psychological work of like trying to like condition me out of who I am. It's not something that maybe a white person or has to deal with.
I'm gonna like go back to the story about your older brother. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. It's crazy. I will say though, I grew up with 2 older sisters and 1 older brother. And I think that honestly, my relationship with my brother is like very much the opposite to, like compared to your relationship. My brother is like acting like, I'm not sure he's more, well, I think he's more empathetic than my sisters, to be frank, but there's also like a larger age gap between me and my sister, so I don't really know if that like contributes to it, like we just spent more time together. But yeah, so I think it's really funny that we have like the opposite experiences. Yeah, he's more empathetic, but sometimes he's not. And also he's more patient than they are, which I think also contributes to like empathy in a sense, that it takes a lot of time to like really put yourself in other people's shoes and like understand what they're going through and like be there for them. The other thing I was gonna say is that you talked about him like crying on the phone, and I think that's a very common thing with men a lot of the time, like this weaponized, like they use like the fact that women are more empathetic or like other people in general are more empathetic and willing to like feel bad for them and like like give them another chance or whatever, just because they're having this emotional experience. Right. And that sort of transitions into the next question that I'm going to ask you guys, which is like, how much do you think these differences in empathy amongst different gender identities contribute to like overarching social institutional like problems such as like the patriarchy, like misogyny in general, like I said, institutional issues that we face.
Can you ask your question in a different way?
Yes. I'm gonna try to think of a different way to ask it. How much do you think the differences in empathy amongst the different like gender identities contributes to? Because empathy is at its core is understanding, right? So like how much do you think the lack of understanding amongst different gender identities contributes to the overarching like institutional problems amongst different gender identities?
One of the biggest example that people usually use to show how like the lack of empathy in men is very flagrant among our policymakers or the wars that are going on like around the world. I feel as though like in countries where, for that's one example, in countries where like women are usually or there are much more women that are allowed to be in a position where they can pass policies or like make decisions. We don't really hear about them, which for me is a good thing. That means like sometimes there's something wrong going on there. Like I know there's one country in Africa which is like that, but that happens to be one of the most prominent countries in Africa in the sense that like healthcare is going well. Even the way that the country is being dealt with is going well. We never hear about that unless it's an election or something like that. But then the majority, if not all, the countries where like men in power, there's always some kind of like problems. You know what I'm saying? And even like in different institutions, like I mean that is like another problem of its own. But I do feel like and sometimes like if you have to, for example, take also corporate, I think there's a lot of misogyny in corporate America. One, because obviously a lot of them are run by men, more specifically. Mm-hmm. And number two is because everybody wants to cater to them. And in order for you to cater to someone, like even the jokes, I remember when I used to go to golf clubs with like a lot of those like executives, the jokes that they would make about like the women who were like, how you call it those young girls? The Ghanaians. Mm-hmm. The way they were like sexualize the Ghanaians, the way they even like broke them, the way they even talk about their wives. And you see women like the people with whom they work in the office, you're so funny. No, you're not funny. But they're not like able to say that because they have to play that role constantly. And I think it kind of took a toll on you. Like when you constantly have to play a role, sometimes you even tend to start like believing certain things because you've been playing the game for such a long time. Like you look at the internet, you see how a lot of women like will agree with men on things that like tell them, oh, I'm not a feminist. Feminists are something about the earth. But baby girl, the reason why you can even vote is because of feminists. Like why? Because of the fact that they have had to care for a certain demographics for so long. I think they tend to even forget the reason why certain freedoms, why they even have to have certain freedoms, which is why like now a lot of things that need to be changed are still not changing. A lot of lawmakers or women in justice, whatever that's called, they're still voting in a way that they're not supposed to be voting for because most of them are Christian women. And that's another layer. Religion, conservative religion, also continues to perpetuate this kind of like ideals.
I mean, I think that you can see that play out in just like you can look and see who's coming to different like protests or advocacy spaces. We'll stumble words. But like, who are the people who are showing up to these kinds of events? Who are the people not showing up to these kinds of events? The QRC had to cancel 2 of their ally trainings because people didn't show up when no one signed up. I can suspect women probably feel like, I'm being a good enough ally. And like cishet men feel like, what does that have to do with me? Like you can look at our peer advocates, or like the campus advocates. Pretty much everyone who works there is like a woman or like relates to womanhood. You have one gay man, you have one man that's not just this one cishet man. And like they're clutching on to that one cishet man because they don't have like people who are able to also communicate to other men and like be taken seriously, like in those kinds of spaces. So I think that shapes a lot of like allegiances. And there's not necessarily like there's not really glory in being empathetic, doing the hard thing, doing the fight. And like if you don't have to, it's like why would I take this extra burden on when I don't have to? It doesn't affect me. It doesn't immediately affect some of the people that I'm closest to. And there's like the option to not have to deal with that. So I think that contributes in a lot of spaces, especially if the people you're around also don't have to worry about those things, also don't care about those things. It is more of like associating with those same areas of convenience. So I find like it's better when people have like a more diverse group of friends, like you're more able to feel like to advocate on their behalf for the things that are harmful to them, or to like come to events where like you're not necessarily the catered audience, but it's okay that you're not the catered audience. And yeah, like what I'm saying, there's lots of moments where people who are like expected to do the thing for other people do that. And if you're used to having that divided to you, or you've never had to, why should you start? And that's how you get those problems of like, wow, these men are not being held accountable. They're still getting these taps on the wrist for things that are really bad because they don't know any better. Or like, we don't feel like we should expect more. Like, I'm sure there's a time where like a man has done something and you're like, wow, I'm not even disappointed because this makes a lot of sense right now. And you do get those things of people like laughing off because you're uncomfortable, or you don't say things because it does feel like there's a power imbalance. I think you can see that in a microcosm of our campuses, and who's in certain groups, who's not, who shows up to things, who doesn't. And that's just kind of a little reflection of the bigger way the rest of the world works. That's probably a lot of me doing the same thing, but like, I don't know.
No, that's good. You're good. Did you want to say something about that last question?
Yeah, I would just say that like I feel like when we think about empathy, like for me, it's very much about action and not just about words. Because I feel like so much of like what we see in government is like even when you are a person of color in that position, you still stay silent because you're trying to like get to the next step or get to the next stage. And yeah, because of patriarchy and just like the amount of men in that space, I feel like yeah, it can be easy to like laugh it off or like, you know, not try to be difficult, because I feel like so often like yeah, people that are socialized as women like are taught not to be difficult, that you're not like putting yourself out of the way. So I would say like yeah, once again, I feel like it does come down to race. Like I feel like white women's silence is maybe more impactful, at least for me, and more disappointing because of the expectations, but also I'm not sure if that's fair, because then it's like, oh, I just expect nothing from men because they always disappoint.
The last question, you guys like talked about showing up in different spaces, and then I talked about like the fluidity of identity and things like that, and just like generally having a more diverse like group of people that you surround yourself with as like things that can help mitigate. Also like positions of power, the positions of power you talked about. Do you guys believe there's any other ways to like overcome these differences in empathy, or are those like the general overarching ones that like you think would be best?
I think number one, be open to it. But I feel like if you're not open to anything, you're not never get, you know what I'm saying? Like you never, even with the education. So like just being open to it. And number two, definitely education, because I feel like I became a more empathetic person because I was able to teach myself from, you know, like from about different things, different situation, and it made me understand things from different perspective and understand that it's not about me, right? And then number three, asking question, because you definitely also want to continue educating yourself, not just like reading like education, not like reading book, but education through conversation, because like life is very nuanced. You know, there are things that you read somewhere and you say, oh, I think I understand it fully, but then you'll be met with like situation where like you're like, wait, but I thought this was like supposed to be completely like that, but like no, like you get to understand that there's a gray area, and even within that gray area, empathy still lies. And you know, I don't know, I don't really know how to phrase that, but I think those are the three top one in my opinion. Being open to it, educating yourself through books, and educating yourself through other people as well. Yeah.
I think a lot of it also can start with how we rear people up from an early age. Like, I think just empowering a lot more people in their autonomy and their ability to say no. And when people don't have the capacity to say no yet, like intervening on behalf of that would also make a big difference. Like, I don't think we should have been 2021 and this is the first time someone has called you out for being crazy, for lack of a better word, but really like, you know, controlling or like talking down or feeling entitled to another person. Like, you shouldn't be being told that's not okay for the first time when you're 21. And I think there's a lot in terms of like downplaying. Like, I think a lot of the emotions that like women, like were raised as girls especially, are criticized as having, as being so extreme, feel so extreme because you don't have a place to deal with that. And I think if that was something that was more taught about and more like intentionally addressed for like all people, you wouldn't have those moments of like overstimulation and like where everything comes crashing down at once.
Right.
I think you have a lot more people who are able to better emotionally regulate themselves while also listening to others and standing up for others and respecting the boundaries of others. And there's definitely a way in how you raise and how you talk down to young people before they're even able to process that. So I agree with Ode. And I also do think there are ways to teach kids these different skills, because a lot of this does, like, I think empathy is also like a habit. Like, you have to practice it to actually be good at it, to actually be able to show up for other people. And the sooner you start building that habit and giving people the tools to deal with conflict and to listen without the readiness to respond, you'll have a lot more people who are able to take information and process that to lead to healthier outcomes.
That was really well said. Yeah. Yeah, because I think, like, you know, we just kind of say, like, oh, like, men are emotional, or, like, all these, like, kind of, like traits. And, like, and the thing is, they have the capacity. Like, it's not, like, something that's, like, set in stone. Like, if, like, yeah, if men decide, like, hey, I actually want to, like, put myself, like, gain this skill, because that's really what it is. It's a skill. Then they can do it. So I think it's about, like, yeah, having a growth mindset and knowing that, like, you're gonna be better for it. I think empathy is, like, definitely a hard thing, I don't think it's like, I think it's demanding of more of yourself. Like, I think that, yeah, like I was talking about earlier, like, there's action involved, and like, once you have this feeling for, hey, I want to put myself in your shoes, it goes beyond that, and it says, okay, so what can I do? And yeah, so I think it starts with like being open to it, and then I don't know, I feel like beyond that, yeah, educating yourself. I'm like grateful now that the media like has become a like cool place to like learn about empathy. There's like really cool cartoons for kids like Steven Universe and Adventure Time, and just like, I feel like it's like there are more resources out there for like how to like gain empathy. And yeah, it really does start with self-love and like teaching kids about boundaries. I really agree with that, because how am I supposed to put myself in another person's place if I don't understand myself and what my boundaries are? And like, I think it doesn't have to be something that's like so far out. I think when we think about like, it can literally just like start really close to home. Be like, hey, like, what are my sisters feeling, or like, what are my brothers feeling? And I think starting at like a very like local place is the way to have the most impact, because when it's so far out, it can be really easy to like become attached to it, and maybe you go strong for like a little bit, but then eventually you're like, oh, this is too hard, versus like, okay, it's hard, but I'm doing it because I actually care about it. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you guys so much.
Well, thank you.
This was pleasant. Thank you, guys. I want to thank all of our guests for again coming in and offering their perspectives. I think that I'm extremely grateful. I just want to emphasize, I know a lot of the episode was us talking about the fact that men do not show as much empathy. I don't think that they're incapable of showing empathy. I just think that it's not, like we talked about in the episode, it's not ingrained in them. They are not taught from the beginning to, give as much of themselves. And I think that as a society, we could very much fix this, very much emphasize this a lot more, and make it so that we, amongst all the gender identities, are more so seeing each other equally and empathizing with each other and seeing each other's situations and trying to put ourselves in each other's shoes. And with this episode, I really wanted to emphasize again the non-binary perspective, non-binary and gender fluid, my apologies, perspective, because I don't think it's talked about enough in like academia in general. And I think that it is very differences in empathy that, like with racism and oppression and all of that make it so that patriarchy, misogyny, etc. thrive so much in our society, because the majority, the privileged group, lacks the ability to see things from the oppressed group's perspective. So I think the more we emphasize that, and the more we talk about it, and the more we have these conversations and do all the things that my guests mentioned, the more that we'll be able to fix those things in society. And I just want to thank you guys for listening again. And I hope you tune into the next episode.